Over the last 10 weeks, we've learned about the history of some of the communities in the North Central television viewing area. This week, we wrap up our series as we learn about the history of Lafayette. Lafayette serves as the county seat of Macon County. Today, close to 6,000 people call Lafayette home, and more than 25,000 people live in Macon County, making it the 56th largest county in Tennessee. As you might imagine, this city barely resembles the area when it was first established close to 180 years ago.
Macon County was formed January the 18th, 1842 from parts of Smith County and Sumner County. Those are our parent counties. We were so far from either Carthage or Gallatin is why they needed a new county. And of course, every county has to have a county seat. So that is why, which I think is a good site here in the middle of the county for our county seat. And it originally in the Carthage Gazette newspaper, 22nd of April, 1842, 75 town lots were advertised in the upcoming new town of Mount Vernon. And, but they discovered through the Postal Service that there was already a Mount Vernon and already a Johnstonville. And so the name was changed in a later advertisement in August the 12th of 1842 in the town of Lafayette. And that's your first mention of Lafayette. And at that time, Lafayette was L-A, capital F-A-Y-E-T-T-E. And I'll tell you this, it was named for the French general Marquis de Lafayette, who was, believe it or not, a hero of the American Revolution. And he was a diplomat. And he was very well respected. I guess is why they were wanting to honor him, you know, him being a general in their Army. And in 2002, he was made an honorary United States citizen. Pretty good for a French guy. The land of Lafayette was between two sites. Where it is now, which was owned by John Ballou Johnston and wife Mary Gresham Johnston, with a T of Swedish descent, and the lands of William Buck Holland, where Hearthstone Inn is located. There was 3,000 acres there. And here, I don't know how many acres, but the newly appointed county commissioners, I guess they voted and chose this site here. And probably the number one thing that made them choose this over anywhere else is you had to have water. And our water source was a town spring. And if you go on Scotchville Road, just a block off the square where Paradise Avenue intersects with Scotchville Road, that in that paved parking lot is where the spring was. And there's a sign there that talks about it. And they, of course, through time covered up the spring, but it still flows strong today underneath the road. And actually, I have crawled through the tiles back to the head of the spring, and so it's still there and it still flows, trust me. But that was city water, and it was made obsolete. I think in 1942 the spring was obsolete due to having city water. And they said at that spring that you would have to push sawdust out of the way to get water, because on that site, which was the site of the first home in Lafayette of John Ballou Johnston, but there later on it was a school, and then later on it was a sawmill. There were several post offices around, and at that time period of 1843, there was Bratton's post office, which was Bratton Town. And later, Bratton Town changed its name to Lafayette, and the first postmaster was Dr. Hugh Brown Flippin, and that was 23rd of August, 1842. So it was just a fresh county, a fresh city. You know, everything was just starting. The town lots that were sold created funds to build the courthouse, build the jail, you know, to build the infrastructure of a new city.
The most current courthouse in Lafayette has been here since around 1933, but it isn't the first.
We have had 4 courthouses in our history. Now, we first met at the home of William Dunn, which was located on Old Highway 52 in front of the Armory, and there's actually a little park there that we call the Historic Park, and you can see a monument to the effect honoring William Dunn and his home being the first courthouse. But official courthouses, we have had 4. The first of log, and then all the others were of brick. But in 1860, we had a fire and burned the courthouse. And then after that, in 1901, we had another fire. And then in 1932, we had another fire, which destroyed, all these courthouses. And the courthouse of 32 was a real beautiful courthouse, of which you see the photograph of how beautiful it is, really ornate. And that courthouse came complete with a cupola, with a clock face. It didn't have a clock in it, but it was correct 2 times a day. But the county commission didn't want to spend $400 to put a clock in, which I think at that time would have been invaluable to have a working clock on the square.
Of course, there was controversy with that courthouse and how it burned.
Yes, it was an arson fire, unfortunately, and so many of our records have been lost. But of course, through the efforts of the Historical Society and other venues, the archives, we're trying to reconstruct these records. And I will say this, if you have any deed older than 1901, bring it to the county registrar's office and tell them I said bring it, and ask them if they will scan it and put it in this green reconstruction book. We're trying to reconstruct the burned deeds. July the 4th, 1932 is when the courthouse burned. And of course, from 32 to probably 33, you had construction going on. And the style they chose was not as ornate as the former courthouse. And I suppose during that time, it was just considered a more modern building. And that's the only thing I can say. But I will say this, our courthouse, this courthouse to me, has never looked any better than what it does now, with the historic fence, which I hope, we can find and get more. And it's really clean and well maintained, and I'm very proud of our current courthouse.
This town has quite the history. Did you know Lafayette was once home to a college?
Lafayette College was incorporated January the 21st, 1902, and it was capital L-A, capital F-A-Y-E-T-T-E. And Governor Benton McMillan came and spoke at the inauguration. And it sat where Lafayette Missionary Baptist Church is on College Street. And it had 3 lots, lot 302, 304, and 306. And beside of it, where the current church is where the Hyatt boarding house was, which is some of Barry Hyatt's kinfolks, his ancestors. And there were different boarding houses around. But the college offered classes for male and female in various grades, but they offered classes that weren't taught by just the regular Macon County schools. They were trying to prepare the students for a more excelled education and life beyond just the farm.
A significant event here took place in the 1920s.
The first airplane that landed in Lafayette was on the 4th of July, 1925, as a 4th of July celebration. And it was sponsored by the Juicy Fruit Chewing Gum Company. And it landed behind Citizens Bank on Scotchville Road, which is 1108 Scotchville Road, and Acresville Road runs beside of it. It landed in that long stretch there, which I think that land was owned by Sheriff James Lyon Ragland, Jim Ragland, which if you look around, you'll see Ragland Street and such as that. But his home sat where the current Junior Foods is. But that was a great day for Lafayette and Macon County to have the first airplane. And if you were lucky enough and rich enough and had a quarter, you could ride the airplane. Harris Hauser told me he just kept getting quarters and riding that airplane.
And there was that time the circus came to town for 10 years.
Have you ever thought of running away as a child and joining the circus? Well, if you were alive here in Lafayette in 1937, you wouldn't have had to run far because a circus was formed. The Mighty Hag Show came to town, and their front man was Roy Hag. And during that parade, he spied a young lady who was Frida Etta Ragland, who lived just off the square across from where I said the town spring was, where those apartments are now. And he spied her, they fell in love, romance followed, and then marriage. And because he was associated with the circus, they formed their own circus called the Hag Brothers Circus. And it was formed in 1937 and it ended in 1947. But for all those years, they roamed all over the nation performing. And where did they winter? But here in Lafayette, just off the square in what they call the White's Shopping Center between Paradise Street and the square. There was a big barn. And as I said, there was also a sawmill there. So if you were alive during that time, you could have came and saw Mitzi and Fritzy, the elephants, moving logs and performing for the people. You would have seen the trapeze artists practicing. You would have seen the camels, the lions, the tigers and bears. Oh my, you would have seen it all, you know, because it was here. And everyone local, you might say, became a part of that because they've got to watch it. They got to see them train. They got to enjoy it. And that took place here in that little humble town of Lafayette.
Large crowds often gathered on the square for big events. Check out this photograph from a school rally 80 years ago.
Macon County created a health department, which now it's commonplace to have a health department, but then it was not. So we had a new health department, and to improve the health of everyone, you know, they started with the students, you know, to introduce sanitation and all. And on March the 10th, 1941, they had the blue ribbon parade, and all the schools in Macon County, which were over 50, participated. There was 1,025 students that marched from the high school to the square, led by the Lafayette School Band. And they were all dressed in their finest array because they all wanted to win the prize cup, you know. And Brown School and Old Bottom were the winners of that. And there were speeches from the porch of the Woodmore Hotel, which is seen in the picture, that on that second floor is where they stood and spoke to all these thousands of people. I mean, it was thousands there to hear that.
Today, Lafayette is spelled like you see on this water tower, but that hasn't always been the case. And did local residents ever pronounce the city's name Lafayette in honor of Marcus D. Lafayette?
Of course, I don't know as far as the pronunciation, if they said Lafayette, you know, but when in Rome, you do as the Romans do, and we're country people, so we tend to butcher a proper name. But I do know as far as the spelling that Lafayette, between 1858 and 1894, the name was two words, Lafayette. And then in June the 1st, 1894, the name was changed to Lafayette, capital F-A-Y, one word. And then later on, it became just plain old, as we know it, Lafayette.
Quite a few prominent people once called Lafayette home.
John Washington Butler was a Macon Countyan who was in the House of Representatives, and he introduced a bill called the Butler Bill. And that Butler bill stated that you could not teach anything but the biblical story of creation. You could not teach evolution. Well, there was a guy named John Scopes who violated that, and so they had what they referred to as the Scopes monkey trial, which is famous. You know, if you go to Dayton, Tennessee, they have a museum of it. But our Macon Countyan, John Washington Butler of the House of Representatives, is the one who sponsored that bill. He lived on Union Camp Road, where the intersection of Browns Lane and Union Camp Road is. Where that new house is where his home stood. And he's buried in the nearby Butler Cemetery. Well, now we have claimed two athletes that were renowned, not just beyond our borders, but renowned for so many people. Nero White, who was inducted into the Naismith Memorial Hall of Fame, and she was also inducted into the Women's Basketball Hall of Fame, and she was the first woman inducted into the Naismith Memorial Hall of Fame. And I was told that she could run bases in 10 seconds or less. And then Pat Parker, which you may have heard of Pat Parker and not realize it, is Pat Parker Field. And he was the son of the grandson of Dr. East, Patterson East, which Patterson is an old family name, and Pat's name was John Patterson Parker. He was an excellent football player, basketball player, baseball player, and he was being recruited by the St. Louis Cardinals, and he was also, Notre Dame was going to recruit him, but this was during World War II, and he had a higher calling than his own personal glorification and satisfaction. He had a higher calling to join the military, and he was killed by sniper fire in 45, and in Okinawa, Japan. And of course, he was brought back and buried here in Lafayette. He now resides at Memorial Gardens.
Today, Lafayette is home to some wonderful recreational areas. Local residents and visitors from other areas often visit Winding Stairs and Key Park.
Key Park was the vision of Virginia Beasley, who was a descendant of the John Ballou Johnston and Mary Gresham Johnston. She wanted to honor her ancestors, who were the progenitors of Macon County, having sold the land. And so that was her dream, but she died before that could be completed. So her mother, Delia Key, hence Key Park, took over that dream and fulfilled her desires and gave originally 4 acres of land to create the park and funds. And this cabin behind me sat in front of the current fitness center on Church Street, just a few hundred feet from here. And it was moved here, but through her unselfishness and wish to honor her ancestors, we have this beautiful Key Park enjoyed by so many. This cabin behind me dates back to around 1841 or 42. Winding Stairs, anyone that has been blessed enough to see it knows the beauty of that area. From the first Native Americans who came here and enjoyed the coolness of the gorge and the freshness of the water until today. Picture-wise, during Lafayette College days, you'll find a lot of photographs of people going there. You know, they didn't have their TV and all the things that take up your time today. And that was a restful, enjoying day to go to the park, or not the park, but to the Winding Stairs and enjoy it. And so there are old photographs that exist of it. And then the city, when Miss Christine Harris died, were able to purchase that and then do some land swap and purchase from the Dr. Pipkin and his heir to create a new city park called Wines and Stair Park. And now this park is not only enjoyed by a little old boy on his bicycle who used to go all the time to it, but people from not only all over the county, but everywhere they come in here to see Wines and Stairs. And that's something that we can claim as ours, that has been shared by God, that we can offer to people now.
Macon County historian Randy East says it's remarkable how far Lafayette has advanced through the years, especially with local companies like NCTV leading the way with the latest technology features.
Macon County and Lafayette, traditionally, you know, we were off the beaten path. You know, we had no interstates, no fine, good roads, nor no railroad. But we, you might say, from our humble beginnings, where the Native American roamed, where the bear, the wolf, and the buffalo roamed, we took a sow's ear and made a purse. We took a lemon and made lemonade. And we did not let hindrances of distance get in our way of success. And we became the progressive, peaceful, and positive place that we call home.
The little town that was first going to be named Mount Vernon, then Johnstonville, proves that third time's the charm is true when the name Lafayette was adopted. A city of proud residents who gladly call this area home. Reporting from Lafayette, Barry Hyatt, NCTV.